go into YouTube and... All right, everybody. As mentioned, we're continuing. This is episode 2 of 3 today. I've got Eric Lutton in. You guys might remember him if you've been sticking with us for since the beginning. Eric was running in a special election in the 2020 term. So we'll talk about that as well as some other stuff on this upcoming race this year for him. We're almost in agreement at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. You can go to our website, almostinagreement.com. I have the job description sheet up. It's still got some holes in it that I'm working on filling. I've also started my voter guide for 22, just a list of everybody running, links to shows if I've got shows with them, and then links to their own websites or Facebook page. So you can have an easier way to get access to everybody there. I don't know. That's all I got for that, for the intro part. So we'll let this intro play out, and Eric and I are going to catch up. I'm super excited. It's one of my favorite exploratory, all the crazy cool stuff that their office does that I didn't know existed. We'll follow some of that here shortly. So, almost in agreement with Eric Lutton. Here we go. Some days I'm better than others at hitting that intro right. But Eric Lutton, like I said, it's 2 years ago. We were doing this 2 years ago, and that was one of the most interesting episodes that we'd done, maybe still have done, as far as how much that office does that most people aren't aware of whatsoever, myself included. So we'll review some of that here as we get going. But so right now, at least, you're running unopposed, and so I want to go. I guess let's talk about the last couple of years and how this kind of transitioned, because this is a normal election period.
It is,
and so that's part of why this ballot is so huge, is because we have the DAs, all the judges, as well as your office on this ballot with it for the 8-year seat that it is, and yours stays 8 years as well.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and so the prior had retired a couple of years ago.
In 2019.
Right. You were appointed to fill it, so you finished 2019 through most of 2020, and then were elected to keep the seat in the special election back in 2020. Okay, so I'm understanding the transition parts correctly. So for our newer listeners, that hopefully we have some since last time you were here, let's do the brief history of you. Like kind of where you got high school, how you got into law in the first place, and how you went from law into actually being the current seat that you're in. Sure.
So I'm originally from Indiana. Went to undergrad at a school called Ball State University there in Muncie, Indiana, which is my original hometown. So it was convenient that it was literally 2 miles away from my front door.
Was that Roethlisberger? No, he went to Ohio.
He went to Ohio. Yeah. A MAC school though.
Yeah. Right, one of those other little Ohio schools. Yes.
Yes. Came down here. We had vacationed some in East Tennessee when I was younger, and this was my favorite part of the country. So when it came time to look for law schools, University of Tennessee was one that I considered and ultimately ended up attending. I've sort of taken a weird path to get where I am, because I did not go to school planning to be a defense attorney. I went to school to be a prosecutor.
Okay.
I worked in a prosecutor's office when I was an undergrad. Worked in the prosecutor's office here in Knox County when I was in law school. And after law school, my intention was to go and be a prosecutor. And the DA at the time was a gentleman by the name of Randy Nichols. Randy is still involved locally, but now he works for the sheriff's department.
Right.
And they just didn't have any openings at the time. And so I thought, well, all my focus has been on criminal. I'll hang a shingle and just try and eke through a few months, because I had a newborn baby at home. So not working wasn't an option.
Right.
And in those early days, so I would get appointed to see clients, and I think having an opportunity, and that's how I viewed it, it was an opportunity to sort of sit down and hear people's stories, and to hear about, for the ones that actually did do what they were accused of doing, hearing how they got in that place in their life, what was going on with them.
Right.
It sort of changed my trajectory of thinking that I wanted to be so I stopped wanting to be a prosecutor, and became very invested in the criminal defense side of it, and trying to focus on what could we do to sort of, I just felt like I could make more of a difference trying to help people out that were in really bad situations.
Right, because I think one of the things that we learned about last time you were on is how many services the office has that isn't just here, show up here, and I'll defend you for this little court hearing, and then we'll go on and I never talk to you again. That there's so many other services in place to achieve that goal of, it's not just me keeping you out of jail anymore. It's I see what happened. I see how we got here. Here are some things we can do to, mitigate future instances and future times I'd have to defend you. Because, I had Vivian Shipe earlier in the day, and we were talking about a bunch of different stuff. And, some of the overdose and drug use and rehab and stuff like that is one of her kind of pet project issues, for lack of a better word. And I think your office has a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so, and again, I think coming out of the last time we talked, one of my most exciting things is like, we need to figure out how to make sure more people understand what this office does. Because we, a candidate like Shipe, if she gets the seat, I don't know how well she is familiar with you and vice versa and stuff like that. But a lot of her things that she cares about are stuff that some of your office can help with and or get in contact with. It's one of those, it's the big black book of Knox County government that I think is, I don't know, maybe that's how it should be presented. We need to figure out how to make that so that everybody has that big black book of what services are available. So anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted the bio to, that's what made you make the jump to want to stay a defense attorney. Mm-hmm. And so what got you, because you practiced in the office before.
Yeah, so I was in private practice for about 7 years, and then I was approached by an attorney from within the public defender's office to ask if I would possibly be interested in joining their office. I thought that they were doing really remarkable work. A lot of the types of things that they had, like the social work program, interaction with kids, the kids program, where I guess, people that have listened to this, it's been a couple of years since
right.
I've been on it, so they might not know what I'm talking about there. But, one of the things in Nashville, and this is just Tennessee, but across the country, one of the ways that they predict how many prison beds they're going to need in the future is by looking at third grade reading levels. And based upon those levels, because, the first few years of a child's life, the first few years of a child's scholastic life, where they're kindergarten, first, second
right.
grade, it's really all about learning to read. And then after that, it's taking that skill that you've learned in reading and then if you don't learn to read, you can't process the other information. And so, even doing things like having a children's reading program where we have tutors come in and volunteer to work with kids that are struggling academically, doing things like that. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people in the community that don't know all that we do, but a real problem, and this is something as a county that we're trying to work on. I just actually had a meeting over at the Helen Ross McNabb Center earlier this week, where we're trying to lay out kind of a roadmap of what all services are available in Knox County and how does one access them. Mm-hmm. Right now, if you're somebody that has mental health issues or substance use issues and you're looking for help, a lot of times people just really don't know where to turn.
Right.
Or you'll take somebody that does have some significant mental health issues, and they'll turn to an organization and it's, all right, we can get you in, but it's going to be, here's your appointment in 3 months. And you're telling this person with severe mental health issues,
right.
Or
severe substance issue that, well, I hope I don't kill myself with the drug between then and now. So let's because that's something that Vivian was talking about too, that I found quite interesting, in that mental health and mental health services probably above the others is like, sometimes it needs to be now, and
yes.
We got to figure out how to make it available now. And so that's again, like I don't know. Like, I don't want to campaign talk with you. I want to talk about all the different cool stuff that's going on, and quiz you on other things. Because, like, one of the things to me, and I will go on my tangents of non-campaign stuff for you, because it's not as important since you're not running against anybody. Plus, to all accounts, you've been kicking ass at the job, so there's no reason you shouldn't keep it. Like, one of the things to me, trying to look at this giant ballot, and I guess the bonus is I won't have to do it again for another 8 years. But, like, I don't understand what me as a voter is supposed to look at for a position like yours, like the DA's office, and then all the judges, or the court clerks for that matter. Like, what is, like, I almost, and this is atypical for my brain set, but I almost don't think we should be voting for judges, because what reference do I have on whether somebody's a good judge or not?
It's really difficult for someone to know whether someone is a good judge.
Right.
I mean, unless you're in court every day and you know the law, it's really difficult to know whether a judge is doing what they're supposed to do or not, if you're just a lay person.
Right.
And so I think that historically speaking, people have just they view the person in the black robe as inherently good at doing their job.
Right.
And I'm certainly not gonna talk about individual judges,
Well, you fall under the ethics mess too, so you can't whether you want to or not.
Yeah, but
he really wants to. I can see it.
But not all judges are created equal. Some judges are better than others.
Right.
I guess there are some judges that really go into it with a fair, open mind, where it's like, okay, it's not up to me to say what the outcome should be. It's up to me to apply the law. Take the law that's been passed,
right,
and apply the law. And we don't always see that. I mean, a lot of times you will see situations where you can see the thinking is, right, like that where do I want to end up?
Right, that wonderful lady from Rutherford County that finally quit, thankfully.
Great example, yes.
Because like it seemed to me that she was a what's the word I'm looking for? She had an agenda on the bench, and she figured out how to make it work. It wasn't outside the law per se, but it was a real stretch of it to make it work and that kind of thing. But again, but like. I don't know any of these people. I don't know anything about any of these people. Like the only one on the list, I mean, I've had Dino Colin on the show, so I've got to talk to him. But the only one on the list I even recognized the name was Bud Armstrong, because he used to be the county law director. And so, like, again, it's not I'm not asking you to tell me who to vote for, because really, a lot of these races don't matter either, because they're all running unopposed, except for that part 2 of the chancellor's race. But that's a separate thing. I mean, that's, again, I don't know. Like, is there a reference that you can think of? Because, you'd be a reference, but you can't on ethical purposes. Like, where could I go to find somebody who could help me be a reference for these things? Like, where could, not I personally, but we as people, like, how do we go about it? Like, I mean, I got arrested one time. I don't know who the judge was. And not to say that I didn't deserve this, what was going on anyway. And so it's like, how do I don't know how to make a decision. Again, I guess thankfully I don't have a lot to make, but we are going to vote at least for this Chancery Court Part 2. Like, the actual vote matters because there's somebody running against the incumbent who somehow he got his petition turned back in. Never mind. He had anyway, that's a separate thing I was following. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. And the whole reason that I've gotten to this portion of the show where I'm trying to interview as many people as possible is because I've got 2 goals. I want to meet the people, and I want to figure out what the job is. And, I can meet the people of the judges, but I have no idea what the job is. Like, I have no idea, like, what the actual discretion that an individual has. And I mean, I still have that on some of these other ones, because I'm always confused about, like, how much discretion a trustee has and what they can actually do differently than another person. How much of is it discretion, or is it clearly written in state or county, rules on how you have to do it? And so I guess, like, that was a long-winded way of, like, help me out on maybe a reference that I could use.
Programs like this are really helpful, I think.
Yeah, because I know everything.
but having an opportunity to have a long form conversation. I mean, I know when I was campaigning 2 years ago, and I had an opponent in the primary, and I also had an opponent in the general. I really looked forward to being able to come on this program, or when I went on Inside Tennessee, and so that's not quite as free flowing. It's 30 minutes with commercials, so you've got like 17 or 18 minutes,
right?
But that's so much better than the 90-second soundbite or the generic posts that end up on Facebook. And so, I guess what I would suggest is people can get involved locally. The candidates that are running for office right now are out at some event almost every night, and they're giving their stump speeches. And if people want to go out and get involved, they could. I can't speak for the Democrats, but I know the Republicans. We've got different Republican club meetings, usually multiple ones a week,
right? And
they will be announced. You can go to the
Facebook page. It's now back up again.
Yeah. It was incorrectly taken down. I still don't know what happened there, but a voter could find that information out, and a lot of those groups will say, hey, speaking tonight, like last night in Farragut, for example, you had all 3 chancellor candidates there, and they took turns speaking. Yeah.
Oh, I should have gone to that. That would have been interesting. I can't, like, I get invites all the time, and I just, like, there's no way I can keep up with everything going on. But
there are business and professional groups. North Knox Business Professional Association, the Powell, Hall. All of the different communities have those different groups, and they will usually have the candidates come in.
Right, and I understand that there's a like a Knox County Lawyers Association or something of that nature, that they do a semi-informal polling on some of the judgeships on who the attorneys in town think would do a good job, which, I mean, that makes sense to me. maybe some of them might vote selfishly, but at the end of the day, that's who I'd rather work with. And if it's going to be across a number of specialties in lawyering, it would be helpful.
Yeah, Knoxville Bar Association sends that out, and what they do is they're asking you to only rate the candidates if you know them professionally. So they don't want somebody to go just feel like they have to cast a vote on everything.
Okay.
If you've never practiced in front of, I think Chancellor Weaver's running on a post, so I'll use him as an example. If you want to know what people think of Chancellor Weaver, it should be the people that have practiced in front of Chancellor Weaver who are giving that opinion.
Right.
And so when you see those numbers, it's not that all lawyers voted on all of the positions. They're really only supposed to vote and give their thoughts on positions where they have direct experience with it. And so
right. So like a criminal attorney is not likely to have a lot of contact with the chancellor, with the Chancery Court judges, because but again, like prior to having Dino on, I didn't know that. Like I didn't know what the difference in the Chancery and General Sessions is. Like criminal is the easy one, just because it's in the title. But General Sessions, it's like everything else, except for stuff that the Chancery takes. But some of the stuff the Chancery takes, the General Sessions does too. It's confusing.
Yeah, well, and that poll basically breaks it down in terms of whether someone is. They're wanting them to rank their qualifications. So it's not, do I like this person politically? It's, are they qualified for the job?
Right.
And so it's, do you think they're highly qualified, you're neutral, that they're not qualified, or they're highly not qualified? And so you can kind of get a swath. And I think that if you look at the races, they last did this a couple years ago. I mean, I think that they did a pretty decent job, the bar did, of sort of ranking the candidates.
I'll have to get. I'm sure there's somebody. We'll talk about it off air. If there's somebody that I can contact there that I can get a copy of that from.
I'm sure I can send you a copy.
Okay,
I've got it in my email.
I don't need
years ago, I'm sure, but
right. I don't need the copy of the actual. I mean, the survey would be fun to go over myself, but realistically, the results of the survey, I think, because being a fairly unengaged citizen for a long time, I certainly never knew this existed prior to this year. And if it does exist, where does it go out when it gets published? Does anybody actually publish it?
Yeah, the Knoxville Bar Association publishes it.
But does it go like does the News Sentinel pick it up and put a copy out, or is it on a? Does any of the actual local news do anything with it, or is it just if you know where to look, here it is?
It can. I mean, it can. I know. So when I was campaigning 2 years ago and went on some different platforms, myself and my opponent were asked, like for example, when we went on Inside Tennessee, they asked about it, the results of the bar poll there. So
right.
I don't know that the media is, Knox News is not running on the front page of their paper, to be sure.
Right. So is that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but so your race as well as the DA's race would be in that survey as well?
Yes.
Okay. That's that makes perfect sense that it is. I just didn't think about it in that way.
Yeah. The DA's race, the public defender race, all of the judges, chancellor, criminal court, sessions.
Well, since the DA's been in some hot water though last year, it might get a little more coverage than it has in the past. Just because it's been a crazy year. Yes. I mean, it's been a crazy couple of years. I mean, we were like a month into the pandemic.
We kicked the pandemic off. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like the whole show did. It's crazy. Like, it's phenomenal to me looking back that hasn't been all we've ever talked about the entire show. Like there was a point where we made a point to stop talking about it. Like we can't do this every episode anymore. It's getting old. Okay.
I was gonna say, it certainly made it challenging coming in. I mean, I took over as the leader of the office in 2019, and when immediately into campaigning, and then the pandemic kicked off, March of 2020. And my goodness, we've restructured how the courts operate
right
a half a dozen times out of necessity. So it's been an interesting couple of years. I mean, I feel like we've gotten through it pretty well.
Yeah. So how's that been as far as keeping some sort of timeliness on caseload? Like, has it been, I mean, because it's always been an issue for your office that caseload is exceeding what you can really pull off. And then now all of a sudden the scheduling's out the window.
I'm very proud of what we did. The assistant public defenders that work in that office are very dedicated. I know I was having weekly meetings with the judges all throughout the pandemic as we were planning what we needed to do. And I know at one point we were talking after the first year of the pandemic, so basically March of 2021, the criminal court judges were talking about this massive backlog of cases rather that we have, and they were right. We there is a backlog of cases, specifically jury trials, because for so long you couldn't do jury trials. I went and pulled our internal numbers. I can look and see how many cases we're appointed to. I can look and see how many cases we've closed, and I was very proud to be able to tell the judges, look, you've got a backlog, but it isn't us. You know, we had closed more cases than we had opened in that previous year. And so, yes, we had a backlog of some jury trials because we just couldn't do the jury trials, but we worked hard to make sure that we were, I guess, able to keep the trains running on time, for lack of a better way to put it.
Right.
And that's critical. It's critical for the citizens of Knox County, but it's also critical for my clients. I mean, if someone has a criminal charge hanging over their head, that is a very stressful thing that you don't want to just drag on.
Right.
You know, and you have, you know, in that situation, assuming it's not a victimless crime, you might have an alleged victim somewhere that is looking to be made whole or also wants to know what's going to happen on the case. And so, you know, it's good for nobody if we're dragging our feet. So I was very pleased that even with all the obstacles we had in place, we were able to fulfill what I believe our responsibilities were.
Well, good. That is a nice to hear. So this just popped in my head as a curiosity, because this was happening through. Are we still having court at the jailhouse now? Like, what was that? I remember there was a whole big debacle about they built a courtroom in the prison it was supposedly for security, so we didn't have to worry about transporting prisoners and escapes and stuff like that.
Supposedly.
I mean, I agree. Supposedly, I think it's you know, I mean, we have the big building with the courtroom in it for a reason. That's where it's supposed to be the public jury of your peers kind of conversation. I thought that was the point.
So my understanding is that building is scheduled to be maybe completed in February, but of course, I think it was originally supposed to open in June of last year or July of last year. So it has been delayed.
But it's happening.
It is happening. How much they're going to be able to use it remains to be seen. You know, I went in front of county commission. It was originally pitched that it was going to save the taxpayers this vast amounts of money in transportation savings, and I really don't think that that's the case.
Right.
One, the Tennessee Supreme Court has suspended the rules of criminal procedure as it relates to video hearings because of the pandemic. There's going to come a time when that suspension is lifted, and people have the right to be present in court. They have the right to face their accuser. Also, you cannot be effective as an advocate. If I'm trying to stand in a courtroom and argue, and my client is at a facility 12 miles away that only has access via video, I mean, that means I can't lean over and ask my client a question. They can't lean over and ask me a question. We've been doing things via video well throughout most of the pandemic, but there's literally a single phone line out at the jail we've been able to call out there. So imagine you've got court running. You got 7 different courts operating. You've got 28 assistant public defenders in the courthouse handling hundreds of cases per day. One phone line.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's going to work.
And you can't have meaningful attorney-client conversations over a telephone line at the jail.
I think you can barely have a meaningful conversation with anybody that way.
Yes.
Like I mean, just for scheduling purposes, I had one of the shows I did yesterday. It was over the phone, and like, it was a completely different feel to me trying to do the show, and I'm sure it came across that way. Like as easy as it is for me to wander on through conversation and just keep going, it's so much different when I'm over the phone. Well, and you know, this isn't life-changing stuff we're talking about here. You know, this is just, you know, a couple of people talking about the world that's around them. But like, at the end of the day, you and I aren't going to solve world hunger sitting across this table, but it could be whether somebody's in jail for another 24 hours or 24 years.
Well, and study after study has shown that whenever they have done court virtually, that the accused do a good bit worse. And I think that I know that there are a lot of people that aren't going to find that sympathetic. Like, I appreciate that as a fact.
Well, see, you throw the phrase out, victimless crime, which to me shouldn't be a crime, but that's a whole set. I mean, I at least am an audience that's going to be more in tune to the idea I don't know, like, you may know this number. This just kind of running the train of thought out is, I had a school board person here the other day, and we were talking about how much per pupil funding we get, and at least according to somewhere she got some information, was that they spend almost twice as much. I don't know where the money comes from, but we as a society, for lack of a better word, it's twice as much for the same amount of time of an individual in Knox County or the Knox County jailhouse, whatever you want to call it, as we do on a kid in Knox County schools.
It's expensive to house somebody in jail.
Right.
You know, I think it was $77 a day last I looked at house in Knox County.
That's it? I feel like it's more than that. But and again, like, and then some people, I don't know. Then there's the whole who pays that on the other side thing. But like just the idea that we spend more on keeping people in a box than we do on educating our kids scares the crap out of me.
Well, and I think that we also need to extend that to the idea that someone is going to do worse. That can also mean, and some of these studies have sort of indicated that when you take away the formality and the majesty of court, there is value in that inherently, I think. When a person is standing in front of a judge and a judge is able to make their expectations clear, it is true there are going to be people that doesn't have any impact on at all. But there are a lot of people, and especially if you correlate and you go look at some of the data that has come out of drug courts, and Judge Sloan over in Jefferson County runs a thing called Tea and Rocks Court, where there's a real focus and emphasis on the judge spending time, not just here's my pronouncement on to the next case, but the judge trying to sort of understand what an individual's circumstances are. But also you can create situations, and we've seen this and have seen this in drug courts for decades, of you have somebody that they view the judge as an authority figure.
Right.
And they want the judge to be proud of them. If they've done well, like there's value in the court praising that individual. When you take things and you just make it, you take away the humanity of the situation,
right,
and you make everything remote, we're going to get worse outcomes. We're going to have outcomes that are that end up where they are with where the courts have less information than what they would otherwise ideally have.
Right.
And the attorneys aren't going to be able to do as good of a job. And so, yeah, they've built the facility. I can tell you that we're not going to willingly use it. I mean, I can only control what I can control.
Right.
But if the rules allow me to contest the use of that facility, I'm going to contest the use of the facility, because it's not as good for the client. And even then, and it's not as good for the court system. And the idea that we're going to have to conduct some of these communications like over the telephone, Securus, who operates, they're a company that provides technologies to different jails. So like they monitor phone calls or video out of the jail. They're currently being sued in 7 different states because they were surreptitiously recording attorney-client phone calls and turning them over to the DA. I'm not using those phones.
Right. I mean, I was thinking about that part of the process too. Because like you don't say anything through a phone that you get a call that says this is Knox County Detention Center, whoever's calling you don't say anything on that phone call that you don't want everybody on the planet to hear, because we know they could record it.
Yes.
If we can or do, or is it doesn't matter. Can is enough. And that's enough that I'm not going to, that I wouldn't feel comfortable as a client if I were the other side of that I would feel like I'm having, it's one of those top of the list communications that's supposed to be secure and private. And it's obviously not. I mean,
and as a public defender, you also, we come at it from a disadvantage. Let's say that you get arrested over the weekend for DUI or something. I don't know.
I mean, we can do the true story. Mine was a PI.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
so let's say that you get arrested for PI and you decide that you want to get counsel. And so you go and you make appointments with 5 different law firms around town, and you go and you talk to the different lawyers, and you sort of come to a decision of who you think is the best lawyer for you. You're going to have some inherent trust built in because you've vetted that. You've done the interview process. When someone is accused of a crime and an assistant public defender gets appointed to them, they've not had any say in who that person is. And there's relationship building that has to occur.
Right.
It is important to have a good attorney-client relationship. It is critical that we see our clients in person. It is critical that we have face-to-face interactions with our clients. I mean, I know if I were sitting in a jail cell and I were charged with a serious crime, and my attorney won't even come out to the jail to see me and will periodically just have brief communication over a telephone, I'm probably not going to think that person is actually fighting for me or advocating for me. You can't even take the time to come and sit across from me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's I would assume that there's always that having a public defender is a disadvantage on a bunch of levels, not because of the quality of the work of the public defender, but just because that there's inherent biases that people are going to have because you have a public defender, and then so there's already enough hurdles to overcome for you and that client, and then add another one of having to remotely communicate and try to pretend like you're not getting recorded in the process and stuff like that. Doesn't seem very just, to use a word.
And I think that we're not really, if we're talking about convenience or money savings, we're also not thinking about it the right way there, because when you refuse to bring that client to court, so often that means an additional time that the attorney is going to have to go out and see the client in jail. I mean, sometimes when the client is brought to the courthouse, we're able to have interactions. We're able to talk to them because we're both physically present in the space. We're making a lot more visits to the jail now because we can't have those communications in court. And so instead of paying a person to drive a bus, now that bus is making trips anyway. You know, when you talk about cost savings, whether the bus is half full or whether the bus is all the way full, you're not talking about that much difference in savings.
Yeah.
You know, it's only if it requires a second bus do you then...
Right. I'm sure some truck driver somewhere could do the math on how much weight difference a half full and full bus does in gas cost.
Yeah.
Which does get pretty expensive nowadays. But
instead we're going to pay lawyers to make that trip.
Right.
And if I've got 12 lawyers that have to make a trip out that otherwise wouldn't have had to make the trip out, now you've got 12 people that are getting in their own individual cars and making that trip out. And then we as taxpayers are reimbursing them for their mileage.
Right.
It's not saving any money.
Right. I mean, I'm an advocate of getting city county out of downtown. I'd love to see the city county building, the courthouse, to be somewhere else because that's a really cool building and a really cool site that could have way cooler stuff in it than the mundaneness that is government at large. But yeah, I mean, for lack of a more concise way to say it, it just sounds icky to me. It sounds icky all over, and you made it even worse by I didn't even like I hadn't considered the expense differences and stuff like that, and it's still just I don't know. I don't like it. So anyway, I can add that to my list of things to talk to commissioners about.
It reminds me when I was in private practice, I was doing a lot of federal work, and I had a case where the assistant United States attorney, and this was in Greenville, the assistant United States attorney, they had a policy of we'll turn over discovery, you know, all of the evidence. But if it's going to take 50 DVDs to put it on, you've got to bring me the 50 DVDs. And I guess they had gotten burned because they wanted the DVDs provided to them, and then they would burn them and return them back to you. It wasn't even good enough that I could go there and just swap them.
Right.
You know, here you give me here's a spool, and I you know I'm based in Knoxville. They would pay the federal government would pay me mileage to drive from mile marker A. So once I entered the judicial district, and I'm like, all right, I'm a CJA panel attorney. That means the taxpayers are paying me $125 an hour, and you're going to pay me to drive these discs. You're going to pay me to drive to Best Buy and get the discs. I'm going to get reimbursed from them as part of my case expense. And then you're going to pay me to drive and reimburse me for mileage so I can go hand them to you. So that way I can come back next week and you can pay me to do that again.
Right.
Like, I reckon, and the response is, yeah, but that's coming out of somebody else's budget.
Right. I mean, yeah, we there's a rabbit hole we could fall deep into for me, but yeah, I just don't, I don't see it as a net positive for anybody to really try to push that mobile court or remote courthouse thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't seem right. All right, let's go back to actual politics. So. No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to talk about. You know, I mean, I think one of the things that I would love to go back over and talk about some more is some of the stuff your office does that isn't just going to court.
So we've got the kids program that I talked a little bit about there, and that's, I think we're up to 44 different community partners. So that could be like UT Culinary School or the Knoxville Opera. There is value and benefit to having. And it's not, and this isn't costing the taxpayers anything. You know, this is all volunteer basis. You know, these are volunteers that come in from out of the community, that come to our space, and we're setting it up. But you know, a lot of these children that don't have the ability to get exposed to some things like, well, opera or music or dance or things that will help get them in the door. But then we can also use that programming to then we're providing the tutoring thing. So the children's program, I think, is really great. We do a veterans legal clinic the second Wednesday of every month at 1101 Liberty Street. And what that is we've partnered with law firms from all over the county. And so it really doesn't matter what your legal question is. I mean, if you've got a wills and estates question, I'm not your guy.
Right.
You know, if you want to ask me about a criminal code, I can answer that all day long. But I don't do wills and estates. I don't deal with property transactions. But we get people that volunteer their time. Other attorneys in town come into my office, and then anybody that's a veteran can walk in and basically get free legal advice. And so it saves someone. You know, sometimes somebody might have just a simple question. They might not necessarily need to retain an attorney full time, or retain an attorney to do a particular task. I mean, but sometimes somebody might just have a question that they need to be answered, and so it's kind of our way to give back through the Veterans Legal Clinic.
Because I think that's one of the things to be as a layperson that doesn't fall into the veterans category, though, is that there are times where in business or something like that, just a general question. Mm-hmm. And, I guess it's the joke of lawyers, though, is you ask a lawyer, is this legal or not? Their answer is
depends.
Their answer is, am I willing to defend you on it? Or if I defended you on it, do I think I would win is really the answer. It's never yes or no, unless, can I shoot somebody? No, it's an easy one. But when it gets into the little nuanced stuff, when you ask a lawyer a question, they're answering you whether or not they think they would win if they were defending you. And that is one of the frustrating things to me. He's like, I don't know, I might have told you the story. I tried to do a charity poker tournament. Mm-hmm. And anything that's cards or dice is a whole other category of gambling. All the other gambling's fine. You can get scratchers and you can sports bet now in the state, but cards or dice makes it weird. And so I was calling all over the place, and at the time, I didn't know you existed in all the things you do to call your office. But I ended up with, I think it was the state attorney general's office. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I don't think anybody's going to arrest you for it. That was the answer I got.
Well, I can point to a situation in Knox County, must have been 5-6 years ago, where somebody was having a poker game at their house and a bunch of sheriff's deputies showed up.
Nice.
And took all their money. Civil forfeiture.
I hate that one.
Yeah,
I hate that one so much. Anyway,
and not only the money that was on the table, they went and searched everyone's cars and took property from. So, I sort of understand.
But that one at least presumably was actually gambling. Like my poker
probably was, yeah.
Like the poker tournament that I was trying to put together was a charity thing. It's like, yes, you had to pay to sit, but that went into a pool, and then we took a little bit for expenses or for prizes. But the majority of that money was, I think it was Wounded Warrior Project that we were working with, and so that was the point. The point was to raise money for them, but to try to but it's also, I was trying to make a big deal out of it. I wanted to make it a big event, so I wanted to advertise for it so I could get more people involved, so I could raise more money for the thing I was trying to raise it for. But I was like, I don't want to go through all this process and start all this thing and get a partnership with this thing and then start my tournament, and then sheriff's office rolls in, takes all their stuff, goes through all their crap and all the other stuff. And so it's like, I couldn't get, it was everybody I asked was either consult your attorney, which I didn't have at the time, or I don't think anything would happen.
But that's just it. That's a risky place to put yourself, right? I mean,
right. And it's like, I do I have any, have I pissed anybody off politically where it may become an issue? Like I've started talking to sheriffs for the show. It's like, I've got Jimmy coming in. I had Spangler on a while back, and it's like, I don't know, maybe I'll do a show and I'll make them look bad and they'll be angry at me and they'll look for an excuse to come after me, which is, I'm not saying that they would or should, but when the answer I'm getting legally speaking is, I don't know, and I already have a little bit of beef over here, that's literally just like kind of throwing some chum out in the waters there. It doesn't seem like a smart thing for me to do. And it's all an attempt I enjoy poker and it would be a good fundraiser, but that's all lost. And I don't know if I'm going to go to jail for it.
Yeah.
And so that's a weirdism. I do like I would love the idea to open it up outside of veterans, but having anything open to where anybody can get some legal advice that doesn't cost them an arm and a leg is a good thing. Anyway, so you continue on. So VA stuff, kid stuff.
Got a new program that we're starting up that I'm really excited about. We, as you may know, we're pretty restricted about the types of law we can practice as public defenders. Our mandate is to go and defend people that are accused of a crime. Sometimes that can get into a situation where you sort of have these overlaps, where maybe it would make sense that if we could do a little bit more than we're allowed to do, but we're not. So I can't have assistant public defenders, for example, do things as it relates to education law. And so one of the things that we've identified is that, especially in juvenile court, there are a lot of kids that come through the juvenile court system that, and I'm not blaming the schools here, because I think in many instances the schools don't have the information they need, because you may have a parent or a guardian who's not providing the information, or the number of times you might have a child with a learning disability or a mental health issue that the parent doesn't want to acknowledge, where a student needs something called an IEP, an individualized education plan. I sought grant funding and was able to secure a nearly $500,000 grant that came into Knox County. We were one of only 3 districts to get it. Knox County got it, Cincinnati, Ohio got it, and Boston, Massachusetts got a grant. And basically what it's going to allow me to do is have an attorney on staff that when we have juveniles, children that are coming through that are possibly getting removed from school or could be getting kicked out of school, that we're able to make sure that we're able to advocate not only for them in juvenile court, but to also advocate for them outside of juvenile court to make sure that they're getting what they need from the school system to be successful. I mean, ultimately, if we can take some of the high risk, high need children and get them back on the right path by making sure that they're getting what they're supposed to be getting.
Right. It's money savings in the future because you don't have to defend them again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're basically, starting in April, we're going to be able to roll that program out. I'm very excited about that. I felt like it was a real feather in our cap to be able to get that grant. That was, it was pretty competitive. There were a lot of applicants. Really? Yeah.
You said, now I remember last time you were here, you were talking about, it was like Harvard or something had sent some people down. They were doing some studying of your office's skills.
Yes. Yeah. So we did through Harvard Law School's Access to Justice Lab, partnered with my office. And basically the idea is we've got 7 social workers on staff, and we practice what we call client-centered holistic representation. And the holistic part is this idea that we do want to represent the person as a whole, recognize that there's more to it than just the shoplifting charge from Walmart. There's probably a reason underlying the shoplifting charge from Walmart. And if we can start to get to those reasons and deal with them, we're less likely to see them again in the future. And so as part of that, we have 7 social workers on staff. We were able to show some pretty significant results that it had a positive impact when we were able to put social workers on a case and interact with the client, that they were, in some instances, less likely to reoffend. If a person is stealing to feed an addiction and you can get them the help that they need with the addiction, you've stopped the stealing. And so that's good for everybody. I mean, that's good for the courts. It's good for the citizens of Knox County. It's good for my client. I love nothing better than when a client is successful. It's
right. A good day for you is you never see him again.
That's right. I
mean, it's a weird positive, but it is. If the best result you can have is to never see an individual again and is alive.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, and one of the things that sustains me in this work is whenever I'm out in the community and I run across somebody, or run into somebody that I represented years ago that is telling me how they've been able to kind of turn things around, that they're reunited with their family, that they're working, that they're doing the things that society would kind of hope a person would do. Some of these individuals have had to climb out of significant holes. I mean, I think most people would be shocked to find out what percentage of my clients use drugs for the first time with their parent or guardians. It's something that sometimes is handed down through families. And so we're expecting this person who's 18, 19, 20 years old to be an upstanding, productive member of society, but they've been using, meth at home with their parents since they were 13. Like it's such a disadvantage.
Right. The entirety of their nature versus nurture part has been one direction, and it is not the direction of this ideal citizen that we were talking about. And
that doesn't mean that they're a bad person, but it means that they've got some obstacles that they're going to have to overcome because they've been really put behind the 8 ball.
Right.
And so so basically we were able to show some positive data. We did an internal study because we wanted to know that what we were doing worked.
I mean, the cheap part of me, like that to me, I think is especially in governance and politics conversation, is this now saves us this later.
Yes.
And I'm assuming, or I'm hoping that the punchline of what you're getting to is it costs us this much now to do this work, but for every single one that doesn't come back, we're saving twice as much as we spent.
Yeah. So
you probably have real numbers. I'm just making stuff up.
So what Harvard noticed, so on our internal data, we were basically able to show that individuals that were, we looked at individuals charged with misdemeanors. It can be a little difficult to do a true apples to apples comparison on felonies. There's so many different things that come into play, like prior criminal history can affect sentencing range issues. There's such a wide disparity amongst the different types of charges. So it's a little bit easier to look at it just basically on a misdemeanor. We only have enough social workers to give to roughly 10% of our clients. But what we found is that when on those misdemeanor cases, the people that got social workers, and it's the attorneys that are doing the social work referral, the clients that got social workers typically had much lengthier criminal histories than their counterparts who did not get social workers. And I think that what that is
there's water right behind you if you need one.
Oh, thank you. I think that's a triage process. The attorneys are trying to identify the people that they think are highest need. you would expect that if someone comes to you with greater incidences of criminal history, that they would continue on that path if nothing has changed. And what we found is that they actually were less likely to pick up future misdemeanor offenses than their counterparts who did not get a social worker. And so when Harvard Law School's Access to Justice Lab found out about our internal study, we worked with them and designed a double-blind study. Because one of the possible criticisms is, anytime you're doing your own internal study, you're always open to the possibility or the criticism that you could cherry pick your numbers if you wanted to.
Right.
That I could somehow be identifying the people that I think have a greater chance of turning it around, and that's why we selected them to get a social worker.
Right.
And so we did it was about 2 years where we had a period of randomization where the attorney would make the referral for a social worker, but it was generated by Harvard whether or not the person was placed in the study group or the control group. We finished the randomization process. We're finished with that, but now we're in a 3-year study follow-up where information from the Department of Safety, from Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, employment data, it's all being aggregated. And then they're basically going to be able to see, hey, is there a meaningful difference that we can show between when somebody gets a social worker versus when they don't? And so that's what the Harvard study was. I'm hopeful what those numbers are going to show, but we don't have the data back yet. They're still in the study period.
Cool. Well, next time you run for office in 8 years, we'll have it back and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe we'll put a pin in the idea is when you start getting that data back that we can do a show that's all we talk about specifically is some of that data coming back, because I find it fascinating because again, just because it's hot on my brain because I was talking to Vivian about it, especially in the substance abuse department. I think one of the things we don't talk about enough as far as what public policy can be is what is putting people into substance abuse. Because again, like I make the joke all the time, I like football. I'm a Packers fan. Mm-hmm. I will sit in front of that TV and nothing else exists. Like I fold laundry while I watch games because I'm such an anxious fan watching my Packers that I have to do something with my hands or I'm freaking out. But I'm not thinking about the chores. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about other stuff. Escapism is a reality of humanity. It's one of the things we do. Sure. And for a lot of people, that's what drug use is. That's their escape from the terribleness that is their existence. And that's one of the things in policy that I don't think we talk about enough when we're talking about substance abuse issues, is we're talking about rehabs, we're talking about getting people better, which is fine. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be talking about that, but I think what is driving people towards, terrible example being I started with my parents when I was 13, but just other examples of what am I trying to hide from? And why are so many people trying to hide so much from the reality that is their life? What is so bad that crack is a better option or heroin is a better option? I guess crack's not really around anymore. That's a bad example, but like heroin or meth is a better option than just living your actual life. And I think that's one of the things that is on a policy standpoint, not necessarily your office, that we can do some work on. We can really start talking about it because it's a fulfilled life, meaningful work, family, friends, stuff like that that somehow is inaccessible to certain people. And so the closest friend they have is their dealer. Yeah. And that's all they've got. That's their best human interaction is the guy that's giving them the drug that's killing them.
I mean, we have, we certainly have people come through that did not come from really troubling backgrounds. I mean, anything from, I can recall clients that made it to their 50s or 60s and had never picked up criminal charges until then. And, sometimes it was precipitated by, somebody falls off of a ladder or something and they get injured and then they end up on pain pills. And then they, I recall representing a young man that had been deployed overseas in the military and came back, his back was just annihilated. Ended up on addicted to pain pills, and then as they shut down the pain clinics, then it graduates to heroin. And so there are certainly people that get addicted that did not come from troubled backgrounds. Right. Sometimes circumstances can intervene in life, but a significant majority, I think. There are these things called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And what we know is that, oh gosh, I didn't know I was going to be talking about this. Let me see if I can pull the numbers out of my head here.
I mean, it's my fault. I made you feel like this might be about your campaign.
Okay, so it's somebody who has. So what ACEs are is it's a 10-question questionnaire, and it's asking questions along the lines of: did you have enough food in the home growing up? Did you feel loved? Were you physically abused? Were you sexually abused? All of these different things that can sort of be. Did you feel loved? that can sort of identify trauma. And what they've found is that on that 10-question questionnaire, if someone answers yes to 5 or more of those questions, if they answer yes to 5 of them, they're 7 to 10 times more likely to be an illicit drug user. If they're 6 or more, they're 46 times more likely to be an IV drug user than their non-ACEs counterparts.
Right.
And so you sometimes hear people talk about, well, don't make excuses for your upbringing and things like that. But like I say, I mean, I've had clients whose parents literally the parents were pimping them out and doing drugs together when they were preteens. I mean,
right. For all intents and purposes, I'm a pretty normal, middle of the road kind of person, or whatever. And I still hate my mom for a few things here and there. I still blame my mom for a lot of my problems, because in reality, it's there. The way my parents interacted with me affect the way I interact with my wife and my kids, and it's not all good. And while my circumstances aren't near what we're talking about, it is a pretty straight line between how my parents treated me and the way I interacted with my parents as a child, and how I treat others around me. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a leap of it's not a leap of logic to get there, where in a much uglier version of a parent-child relationship turns out a worse child.
Well, and as that child becomes an adult, even if they realize, hey, this was really messed up, my parents shouldn't have done this to me or whatever, and they really want to try and get their head on straight. I mean, if you're actively using with your family as a child, there's probably not much value being placed on education. There's probably not much value being placed on work ethic. There's probably not much value being placed on a lot of the things that make people be able to have success.
Right, and probably the highlights of your childhood, you're high.
Yeah.
Because that was the only time you were getting along with everybody, because you were all shooting up together.
And now it's much harder, because if now you're 20, 21 years old, you don't have a high school diploma, kind of getting yourself in a position to succeed if you've gotten to the first, through the first quarter of your life, or first third of your life rather, without education, without the tools necessary to succeed. I mean, it's a heavy lift for somebody to come back from that. It doesn't mean that they can't, and we want to try and help them however we can to make them to help put them in a position to be successful. But,
right. And that's assuming they're lucky enough to get your office as part of the program and some of the programs that you have available through your office. They may, if they happen to be Knox County residents, if they happen to be all this other stuff, how many other people out there in neighboring counties, or even some people here that don't, for reason A, B, or C, don't have access to your office like some people do.
There are very few social workers and public defender offices in the state of Tennessee. It's something that I've been pushing really hard for it. And we have gotten some grant funding across the state to put a handful of social workers in some other public defender offices. We're trying to show the proof of concept. When I was originally appointed to this position and interviewed with Governor Lee, the governor and I talked pretty extensively about the value of social workers and public defender offices, and we're just going to have to see if ultimately that's something that gets funded. I think it makes sense to fund it, because I think that, just like you were talking about before, sometimes you're better off spending $1 now to save $5 later.
I mean, hell, I'll spend $1 now to be at $0 later if it's a positive outcome for the community.
Yeah.
I can spend $1 now to save $1 later, and we can have a net zero gain out of it, and it's still a positive, because how many crimes not committed,
Absolutely.
How much property not stolen, how many people not injured, how many people not dead for that matter, by spending the $1 a day.
Yeah, and I remember when I was looking at the data that we had talked about earlier that led to the Harvard study with those misdemeanors, I think it worked out to people were picking up on average 0.81 fewer misdemeanors going forward, which doesn't sound like much. But again, you would have expected them, with the greater criminal histories, to be picking up more. But even that 0.81, if you correlate that with the average length of incarceration for an offense and how much it costs, it was saving the taxpayers, I think it was something like $1.7 million, which was over a 5-time return on investment for what we currently spend on our social work program.
Right.
And that's just on 10% of misdemeanors.
Right. Yeah, because it makes sense to me. I like it. I'm in. This is the last episode all over again. I remember finishing the last episode. I'm so excited about your office. It's the coolest thing around. All right. So again, since we're not really bothering with the campaign part of it, there's a number that floats around, and I've heard it a bunch of different ways, of what percentage of our detention center population has actually been convicted of the crime. Because I hear it's pretty low.
I would say that it's pretty low. Yeah. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I think we were around 970 some in custody when I last checked. Now there is a pretty decent chunk that are in on violations of probation. So a conviction has entered, but now there's a new allegation that individual has somehow violated probation. One of the fights that we're fighting about right now is the idea of pretrial incarceration.
Right.
We live in a country where we espouse
cash bail sucks.
Yes, we espouse the idea that you're innocent until proven guilty, but we don't act like that in practice.
Right.
There's all manner of case law that says that you can only incarcerate somebody pretrial if there's a compelling governmental interest as to why you're able to do so. And the compelling governmental interests that have been found to be sufficient are danger to the community. So if a person's dangerous, they're saying, all right, you can, if
we don't put you in right now, you're going to kill somebody else tomorrow.
Yeah. If the state can show that person is a danger to the community, then they are allowed to incarcerate them pretrial. Or if they can show that the person is a flight risk. Absent those two things, you're not really absent a showing of dangerousness or flight risk, the person should be released pretrial.
I guess this comes up to this is a good factor on judge questions then too, I suppose, is who gets to set bail and how much. Because again, we could okay, they're not a danger to the community, they're not a flight risk, but this guy, works at McDonald's part-time, we're going to put a $10,000 bail on him. You might as well just give him no bail. It doesn't matter.
And that's just it. Yes. If you put a bail on someone, we had a case in court just the other day. I'm not going to go into specifics enough that anybody could identify who or what it is, but there are these things called fugitive from justice warrants, where if a person has a warrant in another state, that the state it basically gives Tennessee a way to hold them to say that other state, hey, Minnesota, we got your guy,
right? You
got 2 weeks, come get him, but under the Tennessee Constitution, people are entitled to bail on those as well. We had somebody recently that wanted to be able to go and turn themselves in that jurisdiction. Whether they will or won't isn't really the question in my mind, but the person has a right to a bail amount. And if a judge sets a bail amount of like $1 million, that's the same as a denial of bail.
Right.
So yes, that does happen, unfortunately, where a judge knows that they're required to set a bail, but they don't want to set a bail on that particular case for whatever reason. And so they'll just set it, absolutely through the roof. But there are supposed to be these things called, where they evaluate someone's ability to pay.
Right.
Because again, if
wasn't like old school, like originally wasn't the idea that we're agreeing on a number, and if you don't show up, you have to pay it.
So a lot.
It's like, isn't that supposed to be like it is supposed to be we set this number, and then when you come back, we don't worry about it. But if you don't come back, then we keep it, or something of that nature.
Originally, and I think this predates even the United States, but I believe that the original idea was that you didn't really have these victimless crimes. And so a lot of times bail amounts that were set to is almost like a surety of, if this person gets convicted, it's to make the victim whole. And so I believe that some of those early bail, the reason why they would do bail, because they've not been able to make any sort of showing that money bail actually makes the community safer. It doesn't. There's no showing that by putting a dollar amount on something that it makes someone more likely to appear in court or less likely to pick up future charges.
Right.
The smarter thing to me seems to do is really be doing an analysis of, is this person a danger to the community? Is this person a flight risk? If they are a danger, then the court's going to incarcerate them pretrial. But if it's just, we're mad at this person.
Well, it comes out to me like it's 2022. We were joking about privacy issues earlier in the jails and stuff like that. It's still 2022. How hard is it to find somebody? Like, realistically, like if you actually have energy and want to go find somebody, you can go find somebody pretty quick. I don't know of many people that can stay in super hiding locally. They could flee, then it's the flight risk part of it. But if you stay in Knox County, you will be found.
Well, and I know you say that you're going to have the sheriffs in, or maybe you already have, I don't recall which, or the sheriff candidates. ask them how many times it's the bail bondsman going out and turning somebody into the jail. It's the sheriff's deputies or the KPD officers, the UTPD officers.
Right, because you're picking them up for you're pulling them over for something else.
For something else. It's not like we have bondsmen that are going out patrolling the community to try and track down the people. I think they get something like 6 months to get them in, and then they get an extension. They can get an extension for another 6 months to get them in.
Right.
And so what usually happens is they just don't, for the most part, they're not really looking at all, at least in the beginning. Now, if they get close to that year point where they're in danger of forfeiting on the bail amount if they don't find him, then I think that in some instances, but usually it's the police, it's the taxpayer funded agency that is the one tracking the individuals down. So in some instances, it's unclear to me, and I don't want to paint a completely wide swath. There are some bondsmen, there are bondsmen that do nothing in there, but then there are also bondsmen that have been reasonably diligent that I've seen in Knox County. But for the most part, the bonding agents aren't the ones that are going down and tracking people down.
Right. It's just a money game for them. It's not
Yes.
it's not a work game. It's a I will promise your 10 grand, but you're going to pay me 200 a day. I keep that 200. You show up to court like you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep that 200, and the court reimburses my 10 grand promise, or it doesn't ever take it from me or whatever in the first place. And so it's literally just a tax on you not being able to afford the 10 grand to put up in the first place. That's really, I mean, that's the only way I can explain bail. Like, that's the easiest way to explain a bail bondman is I promise court that I'll pay 10 grand if he doesn't show up in court.
Yes.
He's going to give me 500, and that's that. I keep that 500 in my pocket. As long as you show up in court, I don't ever give my 10 grand to the court. I never have to do anything on that.
And there's a lot of discussion in Nashville right now in this legislative term about some possible significant bail reform. I don't know what's going to pass, what's not going to pass. There's a lot of moving parts in Knox County right now. The Knox County has been threatened by a group called Civil Rights Corps and the Southern Poverty Law Center with a lawsuit over our unlawful bail practices. For the longest time in Knox County. So there are these factors that are supposed to be considered. I mean, the idea shouldn't be just that you blanket lock people up. You know, there should be some determination. Is this person a danger? Is this person a flight risk? Bail was being set. Money bail was being set basically across the board. The magistrates who were setting the bail wouldn't even have any of the information that they were supposed to be having under the law. You know, under the law, they're supposed to consider things like length of residence in the community, prior criminal history, ties to the community, employment history, whether or not there are reputable people in the community that will vouch for them or basically guarantee transportation. You know, things that are supposed to be about keeping the community safe and making sure that people appear in court. And the bail was being set without any review, without the ability of the person to present any evidence. And as a matter of fact, it was oftentimes being set that the person's in a paddy wagon going out to the jail. And it's just the magistrate. The magistrates were asked at one point, like, how are you coming up with what the money bail amount should be for this individual person? And the magistrate basically just sort of licked his finger and stuck it up in the air and said, I just kind of figure which way the wind is blowing and just pick a dollar amount. So we have, in Knox County, we have made some changes to the way that we're doing bail practice to try and get in compliance. I think that depending on who you would talk to, you'd hear some disagreement about where we are in terms of compliance. I've got some different thoughts on it than maybe some others would, but I think that we're still not there.
Right. I mean, I think it's at least there's effort to get there. That's a start, I suppose. And so any progress is progress, whether it's all the way to where we want it to be or not. Because yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole another hour or two on just justice and criminal justice in the state in general. And because I mean, I lean more libertarian. The idea of a victimless crime seems foreign as hell to me. Like, it doesn't make sense if there is no victim, what's the crime? And so it's just like, what's the point of, like, again, what do I need to what's the word I'm looking for? Repent to. I mean, who am I repenting to on a victimless crime? I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't take anybody else's things and stuff like that. And so I have lots of thoughts on the criminal justice system at large. I'm really still a little confused on this new drone bill that city cops are using. That came in last year. Did you follow that one at all?
I did not.
They're expanding their use of drone. There's expanded use of drones for It's statewide, but it was specifically from Massey, from KPD, and I don't like it. I think we have a big enough problem with privacy issues as is. We don't need to extend that any further.
Yeah, there's unfortunately some bad line of case law on that. Whether or not someone would have a reasonable expectation of privacy in certain areas of their dwelling or curtilage. There's been case law that basically says that, if somebody in a helicopter and airplane can fly over it and see it, then you don't have that expectation of privacy because anybody flying overhead would have.
See, okay, here's my attempt at getting some free legal advice to you. How much, not to you, from you. I own my land, right? I own the house. I own the piece of land that my house is on. Well, technically the bank owns it, still mortgage, but assuming I paid my house off or whatever, I own this house. How much airspace is mine?
Almost none, I think.
Because that's one, like, I asked, again, this is the joy of lawyers. I asked another one. It's like, it should go all the way up. I was like, it should or does. But, because I made the joke. I was like, FedEx is flying their planes over my house all the time. I should be getting some rent payments or something from them. Because, again, that goes into the same thing, that expectation of privacy. It's like, even if you could stretch it enough and say, well, at least the helicopter was over the road. That's public air, whatever. But if it's over my property, I should be able to, I should be able to be naked in my backyard because I have a privacy fence and nobody can see it. But if you flew a plane over my house and saw me naked, it's public indecency. It's like, well, I don't know. And that's one of those weird isms that is the fun gray area that makes the legal system as, we'll say, fun as possible. All right, so plug your campaign for me. Actually, no, time out. I have one more official piece of business because I do this. This brings us back into officially doing campaign stuff. So all my campaign people I have come in, I have 5 questions. We already know some of the answers. We've talked about them here and it's other public record, but just to get it on record officially, question 1 is this the highest elected seat that you're after? Is this the first time you've run for office? Just like the specific short-term political history and then what you see in your future, politically speaking.
So this is the only office I'm ever going to run for.
Okay.
I didn't want to be a politician. This work is really, really important to me. And I would have been content working as an assistant public defender under my predecessor. He very
getting old and stuff.
Yeah, he very much earned his retirement, and so I don't think he's quite figured out how to retire yet because I think he's working as many hours now as he was before. But that's Mark Stevens for you.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that shows the power of the office. So, but the specific answer to the question would be, this is the second time you run for the seat because you already officially ran for it on a special election 2 times ago, and there's no future in politics for you, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I don't have any desire to have any other elected office. I'm not going to run for judge someday. I'm not going to run for DA or county commission or state legislature. No.
County commission is such a huge pay cut. You don't want it anyway. It's like 10% or less of what you make right now. It's bad. Anyway, all right, question 2, what's your favorite ice cream?
Cherry Garcia.
Nice. Number 3 is what's your favorite place here in town to eat?
Jackie's Dream.
All right, that's 2 on that one.
Oh, yeah? Who else had Jackie's Dream?
Oakley, I think.
Okay. Have you been there?
No.
Oh,
it's up in Powell or Halls?
It's right over by Fulton High School.
All right, I'll have to read it.
Do you like spicy food?
Really? Yeah, she said there's chicken tenders.
You got to get the hot chicken.
Okay. All right, yeah, that was definitely Oakley. Really, the 2 and 3 are just me fishing for sponsors. Like, I just want to find out what people like and be like, hey, people come on my show and talk about you. You should pay me and I'll advertise for you. All right, so number 4 goes back into politics. And I think I already know what your thoughts on this are, but just to ask it, do you feel like partisan elections for your seat specifically, but as a whole, benefit the voter?
Yeah, I think as a whole it benefits the voter. I think that you're not going to know where everyone stands on every issue based upon a political party identification, but it gets somebody at least in the ballpark to know where to begin. I think for my race it's a little bit trickier because I don't do any policy making work. None of my work involves.
Right, that goes back to what I was talking about with the judge thing. It's like it's a weird thing especially for us lay people to make a decision on you for it.
But I do think that it provides the voter some information on where to begin. So I do think that it has value. But although I think that it probably has more value in legislative positions than a position like mine or the DA or a judge, because ultimately, if a judge is doing their job correctly, they should just be interpreting the law and not making it.
Right. Understood. All right. So number 5 is you are a Republican. You're running as a Republican. You've spoken quite publicly about your Republicanness. I need you to tell me about a Democrat that you like, whether it's local, state, or federal.
So we have gotten far too adversarial, I think.
This is notice the lawyer brain hard at work right now.
Yeah, and maybe it's because I work in an adversarial system, so I'm used to being able to go at it with somebody at a podium, and then as soon as we step away from the podium, you can be friends again.
Right.
And so, I think that we've as a society on both sides, we've failed to recognize that just because we disagree with somebody on something doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be a bad person or not worthy of our respect. I guess I would take somebody like Jimmy Carter, who I don't think was a very good president. But I think you'd be hard pressed to say that Jimmy Carter isn't a good man, right, and a good person. So, somebody locally here, there's someone fairly prominent in the Democrat Party by the name of Julie Gautreaux that I worked with Julie for a number of years. She was an assistant public defender, and Julie's wonderful. Julie and I probably disagree politically on almost everything. But I would, if she called me and asked if I wanted to go grab a beer, I'd love to sit and have a beer. Julie's hilarious.
I was arguing with her on Facebook with something the other day.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't remember what, but something about the show. Anyway, okay. All right, so that's the official 5 questions. That portion of the show is complete. Now this is the part where I say plug your campaign any way people want to get in touch with you or in touch with your office, or I don't know, a couple minutes. The floor is yours.
Sure. So if anybody wants to read about me, my website is electericlutton.com. Just a real brief plug. I don't have any opposition right now. I'm hoping it stays that way. I'm hoping that no one is running against me because hopefully people that I'm working around and with believe that I'm doing a good job. I think that we've done a lot of really good work over the pandemic, and one of the things that I think has allowed me to transition the office to keep the trains running on time has been my experience in the office. I mean, I don't think anybody else can say what I can say, which is I've been an assistant public defender in the office. I've been a team leader in the office, so that's kind of like a middle management position. I was the deputy public defender, which put me number 2 in charge of the office, and then I've been running the office for the last couple of years. And so sort of knowing the ins and the outs of it, I think, make me better suited to run that office than really anybody else.
I feel like that was a challenge. Challenge, people. He dares you to come out and say you could do better. No. Do you have a website or anything like that you have for the campaign at all?
Yeah, electericlutton.com.
Electericlutton.com. I'll put that in the show notes for people to click through so they don't have to think that hard about how to spell, because I'm a terrible speller.
Yeah.
All right, anything else you want to do?
Not that I can really think of.
So much fun. So good to have you back in here.
Outro time. The invitation.
Eric Lutton, everybody. As I mentioned, it's not much of a campaign when there's nobody running against you. But that office and the stuff that office does, I've always, from last time he was here, I thought was really cool stuff. And it was really cool to catch up on some of the Harvard data as well as some of the other kind of things that have been happening around town in the last couple of years since last time we talked to him. So, you don't have to vote for him because there's nobody running against him. But if somebody does decide to vote to run against him, you can vote for him if you like. You can go to his website, like he said, and learn more. You can go to our website, almostinagreement.com. I have the job descriptions page, which I'll put in some of that for him, as well as my 2022 voter guide, which will have links to this show as well as his website to learn more about him there. We're Almost in Agreement, almostinagreement@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to our website, almostinagreement.com, to get all that stuff I already said. Go to your favorite local or your favorite podcast provider. I guess if there's a local one, hit that one too. But go to your favorite podcast provider. Follow us on there. Like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about us. I've got like I'm 12 into like 200, so we're going to keep rolling. Keep all these candidates coming through, and we'll let you know what we know.